Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney and I'm an evolutionary astrologer. Today I have a new astrologer on named Clarisse Monahan, and Clarice is an astrocartographer. Now, she's a regular astrologer too, but she has written a book called, it's actually just called An Astrologer's Guide to Where You'll Thrive, Astrocartography. It's backwards, I know, but you'll be able to get this on Amazon. It's a really beautiful book, and we're going to talk about it today. And there'll be a link below for where you can access it. You also can learn more about Clarice on her website, which will be below. She just launched an app called Maprodite. So you can kind of play around with that and try to figure some things out. So without further ado, welcome, Clarice.
Thank you so much, Dabney, for having me.
I appreciate it. So, talk to me about how you got involved in astrocartography.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up on my Saturn line in Ireland. And when I first got into astrology, I also got into astrocartography at the same time. And I knew this, and I always knew it was like a little bit one of the more challenging lines, let's say. So that always kind of fascinated me, but I also found some solace in it because I always felt growing up in Ireland that it wasn't for me, that it was
Right.
a little bit too small or I wanted to move somewhere else. And I just never got any breaks in Ireland. Like I always felt it was a little bit harder for me to get things. So as soon as I graduated, I moved the other side of the world. I moved to Australia and actually became an Australian citizen. So I always never, like I never really lived here past university. I'm back here at the moment, but I always felt that Saturn energy. But Saturn for me also represents a very positive side of it as well. It's like responsibility, duty, learning, etc., which I also really respect from my early upbringing. But for me, I've always resonated more with going to places that are a little bit more uplifting for me or abundant for me. So Australia for me was my sun line, and now I currently live in Berlin, which is my Jupiter. And as you know, both of those planets are a little bit more positive, shiny, about stepping more into my power. So while I like to go back and visit Ireland from time to time, I prefer to live on my Jupiter line at the moment.
Beautiful. So I can relate a little bit. And here's the thing with living on a Saturn line is that um, when you're young, before 30, Saturn lines are really hard to get right, I think. And so it's before your first Saturn return. And I lived on a Chiron line. And Chiron's another one of those ones when you're younger, it really can be a real struggle. And I went to Oxford, England for a semester, and I
Wow.
had a terrible time. And in hindsight, I went back and I looked, and it was like ran right through a Chiron line. So I think there is definitely something to this. I got married. Where I got married in Maui on a sun line.
Amazing.
And so I think that is the thing is like for people who don't know, um, the lovely thing about Clarice's book is it's actually very accessible for a beginner. Like this is like the very beginnings of astrocartography because it's a very deep subject. So talk to me about how you got inspired to write this book.
Yeah. And I mean, astrocartography is a bit of a mouthful, but it's rather simple. Like, astro is the study of stars, cartography is the study of maps. So essentially, it's just geography and astrology. And it shows you where your most auspicious and least auspicious places are in the world. And to talk a little bit about like how we have lines or how they work, it's just basically where the planets were at their most powerful at our moment of birth. So the sun is an easy one to track, right? Because the sun rises at around 6 a.m. It culminates at about high noon. It sets, depending on the time of the year, about 6, 7, and then that is its midnight position, around 1 a.m. So that's the four solar sun points that we resonate with. But all the planets have rising, culminating, anti-culminating, and setting points. And they bring power. So when we go to these places where these planets were culminating or setting, and we can activate that energy. So that's essentially how astrocartography works, first and foremost. But why I got inspired to write the book is that there's really no accessible primer on the market. And I felt like there's so many astrology books, and I was in a beautiful position of being able to write a book. And I thought, well, astrocartography, I'm really living it. Like I'm living on my Jupiter line. I've moved from my Saturn line. I've lived on various different lines, and I get to travel all the time. So I get to experience all the lines in real time as well. So I just really wanted something accessible for people so that they could learn what this is, how to use it as a tool, And even for people not interested in astrology, it's such a great tool to have for travel. Like in America, you get 2 weeks holiday per year. Why would you not want to have the best possible holiday? Right? It's kind of a no-brainer to me how astrocartography can be helpful.
Beautiful. Okay, so if you know the basics, and if you don't know the basics, you can download my free astrology workbook, which I'll put a link below to that as well. If you know the basics of the planets and sort of the good and the bad of those energies. So, going from, you can live on a sun line, you can live on a moon line, Venus. A lot of times people want to live on like a Venus or a Jupiter line. And so kind of the shorthand is like, oh, you always want to live on like a benefic, right? One of the good planets. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, in that you kind of need to see like what stage of life are you in? Like, yeah, you want to obviously vacation in a Venus or a Jupiter line. But, looking at your whole chart, if you're like a super Capricorn and like you're not looking for a relationship or something like that, you're really career focused, you might want to live on a Saturn line. So it's not like there's good and bad, it's just what they bring to that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, yeah, a lot of people are like, where's my Venus? Where's my Jupiter? I want to go there. But of course, everyone's natal Venus and Jupiter is in very different conditions, right? And we can't all be blessed with wonderful benefics. However, yes, of course, those benefics are going to be an easier time, but certainly that's not a one size fits all. And for me personally, I'm quite type A. I would be very bored living on a Venus line. So for me, like that, I just know that's not going to resonate. Even for a whole, I'm not like a beach kind of relax on the sea, chill. That's just not my vibe. So for me, I definitely resonate more with the fiery planets. So like Sun, Jupiter, even Mars. And even though, yes, Mars is technically a malefic, Mars can be incredible for people who've lost themselves, maybe in a relationship, or maybe they haven't been putting themselves first. I think it can be incredible either for a holiday or to move to one, to get in shape, not just physically, but mentally, and learn how to put themselves first, be decisive, get things launched. So each planet has a range. So even though Venus, yes, is love, harmony, beauty, the downside of that would maybe be being a little bit more lazy, waiting for things to come to you, not being as ambitious, not being as focused. So there's such a range that we have to work with.
So then the next layer of that. So first, I guess the first layer is you have to sort of know your own chart. And you have to sort of know, what are you looking for in an area? Like, I want to write a book. Okay, well, maybe you go to a Mercury line, or you maybe go to a Saturn line. You need more discipline. Knowing your own chart, and then kind of understanding what there is at play. But then, so if you've ever played around with your astrocartography, you don't have to have astrocartography software to find your lines. You can go to astro.com. Clarice just launched an app. Like, there's different ways that you can do this. But I find a lot of people get confused because it'll say like, Mars on the IC, or it will say Pluto on the descendant, or, and so people don't really understand how that comes into play with the angles. Do you want to discuss like how the angles come into play? And the angles on a chart are your rising, and it's the seventh house cusp is the descendant, the first house cusp is the ascendant, the IC is the fourth house cusp, and the MC is the 10th house cusp. So you're taking into consideration different parts of yourself. So talk.
So the cardinal points are super, super important. And when I was talking earlier about planets that are rising, that's going to be on the AC because that's what's coming in on the eastern horizon. And the culminating point is going to be the MC. And the descendant is going to be the relationship point. That's what's setting. And then the IC is the anti-culminating point. So that's going to be associated with more home personal. So in my book, I did think that was a little bit complicated for people. So I just made it into personal for AC, career for MC, relationship for DC, and home for IC. And I have it broken down. So each planet has a chapter, and then there's 4 areas of that chapter corresponding to each of these lines. So, say, for example, someone really wants to get focused on career. Well, then they might really want to focus on the planet MC line. So, that would be the career line that they would go to first. Now, all of the lines are going to give you somewhat of a knock-on effect. Like, just say you go to your Venus AC line, your personal line. That's going to make you more focused on your look, how you show up. in return, that might make you, get a partner or get a promotion. Like all of these things have a knock-on effect. But if you want to be really specific, you can focus on that particular planetary line.
So this is really cool. I like just as an example, in her book is actually really easy to follow, even for beginners. So let's say you move, you really are, you know, you want to retire, let's say, and there's a sun on the MC line. What do you say about something like that?
Yeah. And it's so funny because I do get to see people who are just starting out in uni and they want to go to college and pick a good place, and then people who are retiring. But of course, everyone's different. Like I get some retirees who want to chill, right? They just want to take it easy, and that's totally fine. And then you get others who, want to drive around and go to lots of different places. And, maybe they've got super mutable charts or whatever it is, but they're definitely not looking for no downtime in that phase of their life. So it really depends on the people. But if you are going to a Sun MC line, like something is going to be illuminated about you there. But if you're not working, you're going to still be in the public eye in some way. So maybe that means that, you take part in your neighborhood community in some way, or you take some sort of a role around there, even if it's not paid. Maybe it's a voluntary role in some way, or maybe you're just more visible in general. Like there's so many ways that can manifest, and maybe it's more of a hobby coming out. But yeah, if someone is looking to be more private and insular and away from the spotlight, maybe they want to focus on a different planetary line because, yeah, in some way that energy is going to come out there. But of course, there's a range. So it doesn't mean that they're going to be like, burning or super ambitious or focusing on career. It could come out in a way that's more at their tempo at that time in life. So no line is essentially bad, and you can get out of it what you want. And that's why I also have little calls to action for each planet, just to kind of give you a sense of how to get the best out of it. Because, if you just think you're going to go to your Venus line and you're going to find love, I mean, that's ridiculous, right? We all have to show, we have to show up, we have to do the work. So it's important that we also, to get the best out of this experience, we're also, being the best version of that planet we can possibly be.
I love it. So so here's the other thing is it is layered. That's the thing that I've learned about astrocartography, and I am by no means an expert. But I have learned that it's layered. So you are looking at the kind of primary cardinal lines. If you do a reading for someone, do you bring in other parts and more specific stuff, or are you like a big picture, let's keep it simple? Like, do you bring in the parents and talk to me about like the next layer of
Yeah.
complexity?
Yeah, so when I do astrocartography readings, I use a couple of different techniques. So I do astrocartography lines, absolutely. Then I also use local space lines on top of that. And then I also use geodetic lines. So I'm usually looking at where all three are converging. And then also for when people are going to move is such a huge question. And I found like for me personally, like I always had a Jupiter line in Berlin, but I only moved there when my progressed moon line hit Berlin. Because then suddenly it was like there was the energy for me to go. It was primed for me to go at that moment. I didn't go before, I didn't go after. I went when my progressed moon was exactly going through Berlin. So what you'll find is that with people, usually a move is a pretty big deal. They want to know when's the best time or when am I going to go? Or if we look in the past, usually they'll have moved at times when their progressions and the transits have been basically pointing them towards that location. So for me, transits and looking at the progressions is such an important part because it really shows you why now, why this place now. Because otherwise, our lines are always there, but they're a little bit dormant. It's just like a transit. Like we need that transit to kind of kickstart it.
Okay, so this is where then all of a sudden I don't know how to do that. So tell me, how would I know when my progressed line goes through a particular, is it,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Do you want me to
basically,
bring up a chart or anything, or is that something you can explain?
yeah, like if you can bring up do you use Astro Gold?
I do use Astrogold,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you literally just bring up your progressed chart instead of your natal chart, and then you map it. That's it.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
really helpful. I was gonna like
Yeah.
pull it up, but like you just kind of
No.
made it
So then you do
simple.
that, and then you can start to overlay and look at, okay, like when is that getting activated? And then you can also add in the transits, right? So we can start to see when the transits are also on top of the progress chart. So I know that's getting a little bit complicated for people, but it's really just help with the timing. It
Okay.
shows you, and that's such an important piece of it. And then you can get really granular. I also use tertiary progressions. I don't know if you've ever used them, but they're a little bit quicker than secondary, and you can map those as well. You can map anything, Dabney. You can also map your solar return chart. So you can do your solar return chart for the year. You can map it, and you can see, okay, where's my sun line going through? Where's my Jupiter? And that can be a great place to go to that particular year. So you can map anything. There's no limit.
That's really helpful. So, a lot of people right now in the US, myself included, are um, looking for escape hatches because it's kind of gotten insane. And so, one of the things that my family has been looking at is getting visas in Portugal.
Yeah.
And I did the kind of basics. And so, for everyone watching, doesn't mean I'm moving to Portugal. It just means I'm looking at different ways if things, go sideways. And, I have a son who is a teenager. Like, I would like to have options. And so, Portugal, I had some good astrocartography there. There were definitely options. We went and visited, we liked it. But it's proven to be more challenging than I had originally thought. And so it sounds like maybe looking at my progressed
Yeah.
chart would be a really intelligent way to see, like, okay, will this, is this like what's happening this year is challenging, but overall this is something that can work, or there might be someplace else that I should like look into.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what you're looking for with those progressions and transits, just to see what's more helpful right now. Is there a blockage? Can the client wait that out? Or just that they know it might be a little bit delayed there, or is there somewhere else that's more conducive to things happening faster? And is that a priority for them? So you're always working in line with their goals as well. But yeah, absolutely, that would be what you should look at because it doesn't mean not ever, it just means maybe not now.
Okay. So what do you get for readings? What do you say is the primary thing people are looking to come to you? I mean, is it like the whole spectrum, or is there kind of like I am looking for love, or I am looking for a career, or what do you get primarily?
I mean, I get a lot, I would say 80% of my clients are looking at travel, right? They're looking at
Okay.
having the best possible travel experience that they can have. And then 20% relocation. So still, or people doing travel and relocation in the future. They're like, yes, I'm interested, but like right now I want to look like where I should go over the next year. So absolutely both. And I would say love is a huge thing, but because I mean I live in Europe, and it's very accessible to get to different countries. It's very cheap, lot different than America. So a lot of people, for example, with love, they'll set their Venus line, their dating apps to their Venus line. So even if they're living in London, they'll set their dating app to maybe Dublin or Frankfurt. They'll travel, they communicate, and then they can, if it resonates, they'll go travel, they'll meet that person. So they're using it very proactively, even if they're not necessarily leaving their city. So, and you can also do that for jobs. Like, say you're applying for jobs, and the headquarters is, going through somewhere where your Jupiter line is. Like, you're going to have more resonance there. Or maybe you want to ask someone to be your mentor from that particular line. So you can absolutely use astrocartography without even leaving your city. And of course, everywhere's so multicultural now. You can meet people from your lines in your current city, just setting that intention or going to places where they would likely frequent as well. But yeah, I would say absolutely love. And the beautiful thing about astrocartography, I like to tell people it's a little bit like a transit. Like we know we get that beautiful 3 week Venus return every year, or every 12 years we get a Jupiter return. When you go to your Jupiter line or your Venus line, it's kind of like getting that transit. You're getting that energy coming to you. So in a way, you're kind of hacking the birth chart a little bit.
That is so fun. I really I like that you make it accessible, because I think it can get very in the weeds. So when you do a reading for someone, do you get in the weeds and just kind of tell them the big picture, or do you show them the weeds too?
I don't because when you're bringing up like multiple maps, so geodetic, local space, and then on top of that the progressed chart, I think it can be a lot. I like to show them the local space and the geodetic because sometimes people can be living in a place and there's no astrocartography line and they're like, why am I here? But they'll have like a really important geodetic line going through it or something. So I like to show them that. But I think once you start getting into like if you're showing a client a four by wheel chart, they're just like, what is going on? Even I can barely look at a four wheel by wheel chart. It's too much, right? So I'm trying to condense it down. So I will give people an in-depth, sheet before we even start the session. So they'll fill that out in advance, they'll send it through, and it'll be like, what do you want to cover? What places are completely not going to be on this list? Where do you have visa restrictions? Do you need to be near cities? So then we're kind of making sure we're limiting the areas we're looking at. So we're not just looking at the whole world. And we're focusing on the hotspots that they really want to connect with. And then we'll look at timing as well. So I try and make it a lot more simplified. But of course, if someone's more advanced, I meet them there. So I'll always kind of test that out as well at the start.
What I'm hearing, and that I don't think I've really processed because I have not spent much time with astrocartography, is how proactive you can be, that it's not just about going on vacation or timing for a move or a move. Now, all those things are great, but there are other applications for it that I don't think I was aware of. So that I think that's kind of cool. So there's
Yeah.
another application that I know that a lot of astrologers use that I don't, and I always want to, but I'm just not, I need to learn how. Um, Timing for kind of mundane events. Do you
Yeah.
do that as well? Because mundane astrology, for those people who don't know, it's a little bit of what I do when I'm talking about politics, or I'm talking about what's happening in a certain country, or um, a natural disaster. You can kind of sometimes see like, okay, this eclipse is going straight through this part of the world. So how do you use it for mundane astrology?
Yeah, and in a way, that's kind of how astrocartography was born because it started with people doing maps of where the eclipse was hitting across the world. So that's kind of how it started back in
Okay.
the 1930s. I mean, of course, astrocartography has been around before. I mean, everyone kind of had this idea of place being very important, but I mean, in terms of how we use it now. So it first started with, the eclipse path, and then someone else was like, well, why don't we add in the planets? So yeah, absolutely. So for example, for mundane, people tend to use geodetic. So, for example, geodetic astrology has the zero Aries point in Greenwich, UK. So that beautiful Saturn Neptune conjunction we're going to have is going to happen right on top of that point, right in the UK. That's where it's going to go through. Yeah,
Oh, see, this is so interesting. Okay, yeah, sorry, because
yeah.
everybody's talking about the Saturn Neptune, and I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about this happening in February, and it is a reset. So that's going to go through the UK, huh?
Yeah, so that's from the geodetic chart. So the geodetic chart is super, super interesting. And I know like a lot of astrologers do look at that for mundane events. So they'll look at, for example, an earthquake or something like that happen. Usually you'll see Uranus culminating, so a Uranus like MC line going through the place, something shocking, etc. So you will see that with the maps, but then you can also map the transits as well. Like you can map anything. So you can map, say, the inauguration of the presidency. What does that look like? You can literally put anything on the software, pull it up, just like you do a solar return chart, you can do the same for any type of event and look at it. And it can be really interesting what you see. I mean, like astrology is just so symbolic and so rich. So the more we play around with that, I mean, it's such a new area. But I've seen there's some astrologers who do it really, really well. I don't myself specialize in mundane astrology. Like I'll sometimes have a look, but yeah, I think it's so, so interesting, especially when you see these big aspects happening, like this conjunction that's going to be happening on the 13th, or sorry, in early Feb. So looking at that, yeah, you can absolutely plot it across and look and see how's that resonating in that particular place. Or, even travel there and see like, okay, I'm going to be here in this place where this is going to be more active for me.
And what's active. That's really interesting. I remember watching another astrocartographer kind of bringing it to life, that the eclipse line had run right through, I believe, Asheville, North Carolina, when there was a big flood there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, but it's one of those things that you have to be really, really on top of. There's so many different things to look at, and so many different places in the world where these eclipse points can actually hit. Like, you wouldn't necessarily be able to call out just Asheville, because it probably hit like 30 other major cities or 15 other places along the lines. But it is something that helps you kind of get a feel for, okay, so the eastern part of the United States, or
Yeah.
this really is very active in Eastern Europe or in Asia or something like that. So it kind of can say there might be a spotlight put there.
Absolutely. And that's what's so fascinating about it. And then you can also look at it as well with synastry. Like usually when you first meet somebody, you can also map what was going on that moment for both of your transits or your progressions. And usually there's some link bringing you together that's priming you for that meeting. So it's so fascinating to look at that as well. as to like why do we meet this person at this exact time. The mapping really shows that as well. So it's just such another rich layer we can add to, not just the transits, not just the natal charts or the Davison relate. By the way, you can also map the Davison relationship chart, which is fascinating too. So this is, you and your partner, you and a sibling, you and a parent, and you can say like, okay, like where's our place together? And it's going to show you that as well, which is really interesting for couples.
Okay, so one of the things too that people will say often is, well, I pulled it up my astrocartography, but no lines run through it.
Mhm.
So what do you say to that?
I say it's the same question as like, I don't have anything in my seventh house. Am I going to have a relationship? And it's like, yes, of course you will, right? And just because you don't have a natal line in a place, like I said, there's other mapping you can do, like geodetic is a separate system, local space, etc. Parans. There's so many other ways you can look at it. But also, you're going to have lots of places where there's lines. I've also just partnered with Royal Caribbean, which is a cruise liner. They're using astrocartography now so that people can access their lines in the ocean. Because I know I get that. That's another question I get, like, hey, my Venus line goes through the Atlantic. What am I going to do? So it's really funny that like companies are now, getting on board with this. It's no longer, fringe astrology. It's super potent and it's super popular. So yes, you can absolutely visit your lines, but I would say start where you do have resonance in a line. And also, I feel like a lot of people get fatigued with astro.com because they use it on their phone and it's not a phone, it's not for use. Like use it on a desktop, do continent by continent, don't be overwhelmed. Or download my app. My app's super easy to use, and you can just, do it planet by planet or put in your partner's details and have it both come up together. So I think that's why people look at astro.com and they're like, this looks like spaghetti on a plate. Because it's not very easy on the eye, right? So take your time with it. Start with one country or start where you've always had a yearning. Like, is there a line there? And start to dig into that. So start with where you most have resonance. That's what I would say. And then the other part is to think about what you want right now. That's the other component with astrocartography. Like I use the 10 planets, they're 10 different archetypes. And sure, Venus and Jupiter are good, but maybe you don't want that right now. Maybe you do want Saturn. Like Saturn can be incredible if you have to do something very serious, or maybe you just want to get serious in your life. Maybe you've been, partying for 10 years and you're like, no, now is my time. Like I'm getting focused. So really like think about what you need right now. Not necessarily like,
Why
oh,
would I want to live on a Pluto line? Is there any benefit to living on a Pluto line? Now, I can see a benefit of a Neptune line because you can tap into your spirituality and like you might have more magical visions. And, Uranus is like kind of energizes you and can be exciting. And like if you want to break out of a rut, but why would someone want to live on a Pluto line?
well, lots of people might want to go there if they're doing a purge or a retreat, or they want to do some deep inner analytical work, or they are a psychotherapist. I think Jung lived on his Pluto line, pretty sure. So, like
Hmm.
for people who are in that field of work, or maybe they work in something very plutonic, like forensic science or detective work, or anything researchy. So yeah, it can be, and some people are just more plutonic. Like if you're somebody who's got a Pluto moon or a Pluto opposite moon, like you're more drawn to these places. Like if you're somebody who's more sensitive and sweet and like not so into that kind of more intense energy, you might balk at Pluto energy. But a lot of people like that. Just like you referenced earlier, if you're a heavy Capricorn person, you might hate being on Jupiter because you're going to be like, where are the rules? Like, this is way too laissez-faire. I don't like this. And meanwhile, if you're a super, Sagittarius person, like lots of really potent Jupiter in your chart, and you go to a Saturn line, you're going to really feel restricted. So you have to think about how do you feel normally? And then, but like having said that, if you are somebody who has been a little bit like, reckless and you want to get serious, maybe Saturn is the planet for you. But we have to think about again, like, where are we coming from and what do we need right now?
Clarice, what are your big three? What's your sun,
Yeah.
moon, and ascendant?
So I'm Leo rising, Aquarius sun, and Taurus moon.
Okay. Well, Clarice was wonderful. She reached out to me independently and asked if she could send me a book. And she didn't even ask me if she could come on or if I'd promote it. She just wanted to send me a book, which I thought was really nice. So thank you. And so I got this really pretty book, and I think it would make a really good gift for the holiday. So if you have somebody that is an astrology fan in your life, or if you yourself are, you can ask for it. I'm going to put the link below, but it's just really easy and pretty and just, I don't know. I got to read it quickly, which was nice because I actually do get lots of astrology books, and so many of them are very academic. And, I just enjoyed having something that like I could just pick up a little bit before bed and like learn a little something. So I enjoyed it. Anything else that you wanted to bring up, or any other little tidbits that people should know before we close out?
Yeah, just have fun with it. Like it can be so nice. Like instead of just like, because we all, vacation and travel, just like the ninth house, is something that it's such a beautiful thing to do. So to be more intentional about it, just to think like, what kind of holiday do I want to have this year? Like, do I want to have a Jupiter one? Do I have a Uranus one? And then planning the itinerary with that planet, it can be so much fun. Like just like anything, when you go to the grocery store, if you don't have a list, like usually you don't come home with good things for the week. But with your holiday, if you know you're going to your Jupiter line, you really double down on that energy. And it can be so fun to bring that with you every step of the way. And then you tend to have a better time, you get better experiences, and then you get to come home with that really big, abundant Jupiter holiday feeling. So it's such a nice way just to use in general, just to plan things and have more fun with, things like recreation and travel.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations on publishing your book. Congratulations on launching your app. And I think that if I was to get an astrocartography reading, I would definitely look you up. So thank you for coming on and just giving people a little bit more about what this is about.
Thank you so much, Dabney.
Yeah, so for everyone out there, there's a reason and a season for it all. The universe is conspiring to help you. And if you stumbled upon this video and you have been thinking about a big move, or you have been thinking about a life change in some way, pay attention. There was a lot of good tips here. So until next time.